Hello and welcome to the third week of these teachings on the three principal aspects of the path. I'm happy you can join us. If you want to ask a question, then please use the live chat facility of this live stream, and I'll try to answer it as soon as I can. I'm not putting aside a question and answer at the end of the teaching. I'd prefer to allow people to ask their questions during the actual live stream. So if you have a question, please just send it by the chat facility. Now, before we start, let's think about our motivation, as we usually do. Why are we coming to the teachings? Why we want to listen to the teachings? So, as I've told you many times before, we have many motivations for doing something. And the motivation for doing a Buddhist or Dharma-related activity should at least be the motivation to attain a happy rebirth in the coming lives. If we only have motivation for this life to gain something in this life, it's not a very good motivation, and it's actually not considered to be a Buddhist motivation. But so the smallest motivation, the least motivation, is for happiness in our future lives. But of course, enlightenment is a much greater motivation than that if we want to attain enlightenment. So if you can think that this discussion is going to contribute towards your enlightenment, and that's why you've come to this discussion this evening, then that's a much better motivation. And if it's done strongly and the dedication is done strongly at the end, then that energy will stay with you until you become enlightened. The greatest motivation, of course, is bodhicitta, the mind that wishes to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. So if we can have that type of motivation, that would be the best of all. Again, as strong as you can make it, if you have that type of motivation, thinking that it's not only me that's suffering, but it's all beings everywhere is suffering. All have their own problems and difficulties. And it would be a little bit shameful of me just to work for my own benefit and just to disregard all the other beings who are suffering. So I'm going to try and do whatever I can to alleviate all our sufferings, all the sufferings in this world, in this universe, wherever there are beings. May I be able to alleviate that suffering, and also may I be able to bring those beings to enlightenment, and in particular, may I attain enlightenment to be able to do that. Because I can only do that properly, and I can only do that most successfully if I'm enlightened. If I'm just still an ordinary being with a very ordinary mindset, I can help a little bit, but not all that much. But if I'm a Buddha or a great Bodhisattva, then I have a much greater capacity to help beings. So let's try to develop some very positive motivation, if you can, motivation of bodhicitta, or if you can't that, then at least try to develop a motivation to participate in these teachings to gain your own enlightenment. So let's just take a moment to think about that and to set a good motivation. Thank you very much. So now we're going through, as you know, the text called The Three Principal Aspects of the Path, or The Three Principles of the Path, written by Lama Tsongkhapa, the founder of the Gelugpa tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. And we've gone through the first introductory lines. I bow down to the Venerable Spiritual Master. And we talked about the Venerable Spiritual Masters, and we talked about what he means by that, and we've spoken about what makes an authentic spiritual master. So this evening we're going to continue and go on to the next few lines, which I did quote before, which go like this. I will explain as well as I am able the essence of all the teachings of the conqueror, the path praised by the conquerors and their spiritual children, the entrance for the fortunate ones who desire liberation. Listen with clear minds, you fortunate ones, who direct your minds to the path pleasing to the Buddha and strive to make good use of leisure and opportunity without being attached to the joys of cyclic existence. So these are the kind of introductory lines before we get to the main body of the text. And we'll first look at the first line. I will explain as well as I am able the essence of all the teachings of the conqueror, the path praised by the conquerors and their spiritual children, the entrance for the fortunate ones who desire liberation. Now, normally, as I told you before, anybody who wrote a Buddhist text, particularly in the Tibetan tradition, would start off with a homage and then would give what they were going to talk about, some synopsis of what they're going to talk about, and then some kind of exhortation to their audience to listen well. So we've gone through the homage, and that was to the spiritual masters. The next lines, I bow down to the ones I've just quoted, are what His Holiness the Dalai Lama calls a promise to compose, or telling us what is in the teachings that are coming, what Lama Tsongkhapa is going to teach. So he talks about explaining as well as he's able the essence of all the teachings of the conqueror, the path praised by the conquerors and their spiritual children, the entrance for the fortunate ones who desire liberation. Now, His Holiness says that when he says, as well as I am able, he's indicating that this is not going to be a long teaching. This is going to be a condensed teaching, in a condensed way, and not like Lama Tsongkhapa's great tome, the Treatise on the Great Stages of the Path to Enlightenment, which runs to 3 volumes, each of several hundred pages. So this is a short teaching which I did read out when we started these live streams. So I'm not going to read it out again. If you want to, you can look back at the first teaching that is still on this live stream, the first live stream, and listen to it there. So what he means by the essence of all the teachings of the conqueror, the essence of all the teachings is referring to renunciation. Remember, the 3 aspects of the path are renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of reality. So the essence of all the teachings here is renunciation. And why is the essence of all the teachings renunciation, which is the first principal aspect of the path? And this is because we have to have renunciation. Renunciation is the thing, is what we need to actually practice the path. We need renunciation. If we don't have renunciation, it's very difficult to practice the path. So Thupten Chodron says, renunciation is what sets us on the path to liberation. We look at cyclic existence with a totally clear and honest mind and see that it is full of faults. There's no lasting happiness, joy, or peace to be found in cyclic existence. Being horrified at the prospect of remaining in the prison of cycle of constantly recurring difficulties and suffering, under the influence of ignorance, afflictions, and karma, we make a firm determination to be free from it. This aspiration for liberation inspires us to practice the path and make Dharma a priority in our lives. So renunciation means, as she says, we take a very good look at the type of life that we are caught up in here in samsara, and try to see that if anywhere we can find long-term satisfaction and happiness. Of course, we're all trying to find happiness. That's our main aim, is to find happiness and to be free of suffering. And if you think of everything that you do every day, it is either to find some happiness or to free yourself from suffering. Examine every single action that you do during the day, and you will see that it is either trying to get happiness or to be free of suffering. But as long as we have any kind of attachment to cyclic existence, to the pleasures of cyclic existence, we will never ever find the long-term happiness we're looking for. It is impossible. So the essence of the path is renunciation, because in the beginning it makes us enter the path, in the middle it keeps us going, and at the end it ensures that we finish the path. So, and that's why they call it the essence. Why Lama Tsongkhapa calls it the essence of the teachings. So then the next part of the line says, the path praised by the conquerors and their spiritual children. Now, the path praised by the conquerors and their spiritual children, the conquerors and their spiritual children are the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, and those who follow the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and the Arhats. The conquerors are the Buddhas, and the spiritual children are those of high realizations who follow the Buddha and understand very well what the Buddha is teaching. So the path praised by the conquerors is bodhicitta. So the essence of the teachings is renunciation. The path praised by the conquerors and their spiritual children is bodhicitta. What is bodhicitta again? The wish to attain enlightenment so that one can be of greatest benefit to all beings everywhere. That is bodhicitta. And that is what is praised by the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Why is it praised by the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas? Well, if you think about it, what is it that brings the greatest happiness? It is the motivation to be of greatest benefit to all beings everywhere. If we can manage to benefit every single being in the universe, every single being that there is, if we can manage to benefit and bring them happiness, wouldn't that be something totally amazing, something wonderful? So even having the aspiration to be of greatest benefit to all beings everywhere, immediately that is something that is extraordinary, because most of us are just concerned with our own happiness, our own immediate satisfaction and freedom from suffering. And immediate, I mean in this particular life. That's most of us are concerned with that. And that's why we go to a job, when we make a comfortable house and get all the comforts and so on, so that we can feel happy and secure and minimize our suffering in this life. But if we're thinking to attain enlightenment, not only for ourselves, but for all beings, and we're making that the most important thing in our lives, that I'm going to attain enlightenment so I can be of greatest benefit to others, then this is so much greater than just looking for our own happiness, and particularly our own happiness in this life. So this is why this is the path praised by all the Buddhas, because the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas see quite clearly that generating and actualizing bodhicitta helps so many beings. If I can become a Buddha and then I can help countless beings, this is so beneficial to every single being. And so this is exactly what the Buddhas want, that we are beneficial to all the beings everywhere as much as we possibly can be. And so this is why it's called the path praised by the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas. Even if we have this motivation and we act out of this motivation, we are still creating enormous benefit both for ourselves and others, because our actions don't occur in a vacuum. Our actions ripple out. If we do an action that makes somebody else happy, that other person will go around, they will leave us, they'll be very happy, and they will pass on that happiness to the next people that they meet, because they will leave us in a happy frame of mind, and they will carry that happy frame of mind into their other relationships. And so it's a ripple effect that goes out. Whenever we create happiness, we're not just creating happiness for ourselves and those we're interacting with, but we're sending out a ripple of happiness into the environment. And so if we have the intention that ripple becomes, actually influences every other sentient being that there possibly is and brings them happiness, you can imagine what great benefit that is. So that's why it's the path praised by the Buddhas. And then the third part of the sentence, the entrance for the fortunate ones who desire liberation. Those who desire liberation, the entrance for those who desire liberation means the understanding the wisdom of reality, the wisdom understanding the nature of reality. And why is that the entrance? Because to attain liberation, we need to create the cause, and we need to eliminate that which prevents our liberation. And what prevents our liberation is ignorance. Ignorance and what comes from ignorance, which is karma and afflictive emotions and negative actions and so on. Those are the things we need to eliminate. To eliminate the ignorance, we need to understand the nature of reality, because ignorance, our foundational ignorance, is the ignorance that does not understand the nature of reality. So if we have the wisdom which understands the nature of reality, we are entering liberation. We are entering the door of liberation. And once we've gone through that door, and we come to a stage where we will never go back through it again. We never fall back into ignorance again. Once we've entered the door to liberation, we practice. We keep on practicing until eventually it is impossible for us to fall back. And so, understanding the nature of reality, even if we haven't practiced a lot, is the door to liberation, the entrance to liberation. So these so that's the meaning. That's the meaning of this particular line. I'm going to now read a quote from Geshe Sonam Rinchen, who I spoke about before, who was a teacher at the Tibetan Library of Works and Archives. And this is what he says about these lines. All the teachings given by the Enlightened Ones are intended to help us avoid bad rebirths, as well as the many other kinds of suffering associated with cyclic existence, and to provide us with a means to reach liberation and enlightenment. For this, skillful means and wisdom must be combined. Of the many forms of skillful means, the highest is the altruistic intention to attain enlightenment for the sake of all living beings. And of the many kinds of understanding, the understanding of the fundamental nature of reality is the most profound. A strong wish for freedom from cyclic existence gives us the impetus to develop both of these. So there are the three principal aspects of the path. To develop bodhicitta and to develop the wisdom, understanding the nature of reality, we need renunciation. That is the fuel that keeps us, that starts us on the path and that keeps us going to the end. So these three principal aspects of the path, you can see that these three principal aspects of the path encompass all the Buddha's teachings. They are a condensation of all the Buddha's teachings into one very condensed form. And Geshe Sonam Rinchen has a very nice metaphor for what this means. He says, it isn't possible to drink the milk of 1,000 cows in its ordinary form, but we can drink it as condensed milk. We may not be able to eat all the algae that go into a bottle of spirulina, or all your barley plants that make up a jar of barley essence, but the concentrates derived from them are easily absorbed and highly nutritious. So this is how he describes the three principal aspects of the path. Of course, the teachings of the Buddha are very extensive, and we can study that. We can study many aspects of the Buddha's teachings. But when we're studying in this form, it is a very condensed form, and it is highly beneficial to get an overview and to get some taste of the Buddha's path, to study and to go through it in this condensed form. So when we in our previous teachings, we talked about the importance of choosing spiritual master. But it's not only important to choose a spiritual master. We must also, it's also very important, and we must also be very careful about the teachings that we decide to follow. Of course, there are many kinds of teachings and self-help seminars and conferences and all sorts of things out in the world that may be of some benefit. But if we want a complete spiritual path that's going to take us out of the samsaric experience and free us, liberate us from samsara completely, then we have to be very careful about the teachings that we take. You know, we can do self-help things just for this life, but once this life is finished, maybe those self-help things that we've learned in this life that have helped us in this life may not be so beneficial in our coming lives. Something like the Buddha's teachings is aimed at improving our coming lives, as well as freeing us completely from the need to take coming lives, leading us to the path of liberation and enlightenment. And so if the Buddha's teachings claim to do this, then we have to examine them very carefully to see if they really do this, or whether they're going to lead us in some direction we don't really want to go. So how do we check whether these teachings are valid? We have to examine the teachings very, very clearly and very closely, and keep our minds open to what's being said. Normally, a spiritual teaching comes from a spiritual teacher that has some revelatory kind of experience, like the Buddha himself. You know, he became enlightened. He had a revelation, became enlightened, And then he went out and taught. And many people, it said that many people who followed his teachings became enlightened themselves, at least as arahants, if not as fully enlightened Buddhas. So when we examine the teachings, we have to examine what the effects have been on the people that have come before, and particularly on those who are recognized as great masters, and see what they say and what their experience is. Many of the great masters themselves have had great spiritual experiences, which they've described in their teachings. And then they've examined teachings like this three principal aspects to the path to see whether these teachings are valid all the way through. No errors have come through. There's no mistakes. And then they've sanctioned these types of teachings. Also, other meditators that practice these teachings, meditators that have practiced the teachings and have gained benefit from them, we have to examine those meditators and see what kind of benefit they've got from their teachings before we decide that we're also going to follow these teachings. So the three, right from the Buddha, the three principal aspects of the path have been practiced and have been examined and contemplated by many great masters. Even though Lama Tsongkhapa was the one that put it in this condensed form, actually the practices of renunciation, bodhicitta, and the pure view were practiced long before Lama Tsongkhapa came along, and he was the great scholar that came and then condensed these teachings, made them available in this condensed form. But they have been examined before he came along, and after he wrote the teachings, they've been examined again and again by great masters and great meditators and found to be valid. So we'll find that we can gain confidence by looking at the teachings in this way. We can gain confidence that these teachings are valid, that these are not only going to benefit us in a small way, but are going to take us all the way to enlightenment. And we can also have some confidence that these teachings are not going to mislead us or take us in a weird direction that lands us in some kind of odd situation that is going to be very uncomfortable for us. So that then is the line, is a promise to compose. In this line, Lama Tsongkhapa is telling us what he's going to talk about in the rest of the teachings. He's going to talk about the essence of the teachings, which is renunciation, the path praised by the Buddhas, which is bodhicitta, and then the entrance to the path of liberation, which is pure view. So now we know what we are going to encounter in the coming teachings. The next few lines, the next line goes on to exhort the audience, Lama Tsongkhapa's audience, to listen well to the teachings, to gain the most benefit out of the teachings. And of course, you don't. If you don't listen well, then there's not going to be much benefit coming out of the teaching. So the next line is the exhortation to listen well, and it goes, listen with clear minds, you fortunate ones, who direct your minds to the path pleasing to the Buddha, and strive to make good use of leisure and opportunity without being attached to the joys of cyclic existence. Now, the nun, Thupten Chodron, I don't speak Tibetan, so I just rely on the English translation. But the nun Thupten Chodron, who does speak Tibetan, makes the point that actually the line is a bit different in the Tibetan, but it's been translated in this way so that it's more easy to understand in English. So Tibetan and English are quite different in their structure. And if we had to translate the Tibetan directly into English, it would sound quite stilted. So, but this is what she's done. Well, this is what Geshe Sonam Rinchen has done, has kind of translated the line directly from Tibetan, and you'll see that it has a different structure, and actually the structure has some meaning, and that's why I'm discussing why we're going to pay a little bit of attention to the Tibetan way, to what the Tibetan says rather than what the English says. So the Tibetan, if we translated it closely, would say something like this: unattached to the joys of worldly existence, striving to use well their freedom and riches, trusting the path that pleases the victors, fortunate ones listen with a pure mind. Now, of course, that would be, if you were listening in English, that might be a bit confusing. But there is a reason why it's written that way in Tibetan. Unattached to the joys of worldly existence. This refers again to renunciation. Being unattached to the joys of worldly existence. The joys of worldly existence are the things that we normally run after in our minds. Good food, and we always want better food, and we want better resources. We want the best. We want status. We want all those sorts of things, which are the joys of worldly existence. These are not spiritual joys. These are the joys of worldly existence. So what he's talking about here is saying being unattached to the joys of worldly existence. In other words, having renounced the joys of worldly existence. Striving to use well their freedom and riches. Freedom and riches means that freedom of riches of this human life. It is said in the teachings that the human life is the best kind of life to practice spirituality, because we have just the right amount of pleasure and pain to understand that how to be free, how to be free. And the lower realms, in the animal and the preta and the hell realms, there's too much suffering and too much ignorance to understand how to be free of suffering. All one can do in those situations is just go through the suffering that one's going through as best one can. But there's no, because the suffering is so intense, or the ignorance is so intense, there's no impetus to be free, or to understand how to be free of suffering in those situations. So, and then in the upper realms, the Zura realms and the God realms, there's too much pleasure. There's too much power and pleasure to want to be free. Obviously, you can imagine that if you have everything that you completely want, everything you need, everything you want, and there's no suffering whatsoever, you have no satisfaction whatsoever, then there's not much impetus to chase liberation or enlightenment. So that's why it's said that in the human realm, we have enough measures of both pleasure and pain to understand that we want to be free of both pleasure and pain, and to attain enlightenment. Not only that, our body, our psychic body, the way that our body is built up, is the best type of body to have to attain enlightenment. And even in the tantric system, it says that this is the only body that can attain that can attain enlightenment. So many bodhisattvas in Pure Lands, it's said that many bodhisattvas in Pure Lands pray to be born as a human being so that they can become enlightened in this particular body. So that's part of the teachings. But even though human existence is supposed to be the best type of existence to attain enlightenment, it's not all human beings have the opportunity to attain enlightenment. Obviously, somebody who's starving to death in some war-torn African country doesn't have the capability to attain enlightenment or the facilities to attain enlightenment. And that's in that kind of situation, you might have a human life, but it is so beset by difficulties that it's very difficult to do anything to free yourself. You're just wondering how you're going to survive from day to day. And there are many situations like this in the world where even though people have human bodies, they don't have the other conditions to want to attain enlightenment or to pursue the path to enlightenment. So when we're talking about the freedoms and richnesses, there are actually 18 freedoms and richnesses, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and which you might have heard me talk about before. To have a precious human rebirth, which is the human rebirth that can follow the Dharma and attain enlightenment, can practice, follow the Dharma, practice, and attain enlightenment. So, striving to use well their freedom and riches, means that having this precious human rebirth, we use it to the fullest extent. And striving well to use it means that developing bodhicitta. The best use that we can make of this human rebirth is to train the mind in bodhicitta, in the wish to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. Making ourselves open to working for all beings' sake, not only for our own sake, and training the mind so that it becomes flexible and viable enough so that it starts thinking only of others and not of one's own selfish wishes and desires. And this wish for bodhicitta, this motivation, this aspiration, drives us and makes best use of this life. And then the next part of the line goes, trusting the path that pleases the victors. Now we've already spoken about the path that pleases the Buddhas, and that is the path that is the understanding of emptiness, the understanding the nature of reality. Because it is only through understanding the nature of reality that we can actually achieve liberation and enlightenment. There's no other way. Even having bodhicitta, if we don't understand the nature of reality, we cannot escape cyclic existence. Even having just renunciation, we cannot escape cyclic existence. Having bodhicitta, just bodhicitta and renunciation, we cannot escape cyclic existence. The only way we can escape cyclic existence is through understanding the nature of reality. And so this is what trusting the path that pleases the victors means. So then he talks about fortunate ones. What do we mean by fortunate ones? So, of course, fortunate ones are those who have the precious human rebirth with all the conditions to be able to practice the Dharma. But not only that, it is the fortunate ones are those who've developed a very strong wish in their minds to attain liberation and to be free of suffering. Geshe Sonam Rinchen uses the idea of a sumptuous of being invited to a sumptuous feast. If you're invited to a sumptuous feast and you sit down, but food is given to everybody, this delicious food is given to everybody except you. You are left and nobody serves you, and you're not given the food even though you've been invited to the feast. Then of course you'd be very upset. But he makes the point that of course you'd be very upset that you had to go to this feast and then you were not given any food, you were not served any food. But this would be much less important than if you had the opportunity to follow the Buddhist path, the spiritual path, and then for some reason you missed out these teachings. So how would you feel if there was the share of Buddhist teachings, which is your share of Buddhist teachings, but then through some occurrence you couldn't have that share, you couldn't consume that share of the Buddha's teachings? He says, would you feel deprived and consider it the loss of something valuable? And he talks about the truly fortunate ones are those who are completely indifferent to the enthralling pleasures of cyclic existence, those whose minds are turned completely to the path, that really want their share of the Buddha's teachings and will not do anything that deprives them of their share of the Buddha's teachings. In other words, those who renounced cyclic existence and who are intent on gaining all they can, all the benefit they can from the Buddha's teachings, developing bodhicitta and the understanding of the nature of reality, and so on. And so truly fortunate ones are those who have this attitude, that they cannot bear to be without their share of the Buddha's teachings, and then completely indifferent to the most enthralling pleasures of cyclic existence. Now let's take an example. Say there was an offer. You bought a lotto ticket, and there was a main prize of $5 million, as well as a Lamborghini Gallardo car, plus a 7-seater Audi car, and a Ray Glass 220 powerboat, and $675,000 cash towards a batch or holiday home, plus a Visa Platinum credit card loaded with $50,000, and another $50,000 which you could use towards luxury travel. If that was in front of you, could you be indifferent to all that? Just to take an example from Lotto. What would be your attitude if you knew that you could win that, and there was a very good chance that you could win that? And even if you did win that, let's say you did win that, what would be your attitude to that? Because in our minds, of course, winning Lotto is to many of our minds, winning Lotto is something that we really want. We talk about often. We say, when I win Lotto, then I'll do this or I'll do that, or when I win Lotto, I'll give you so much, or whatever we say. And winning Lotto has become a kind of, a byphrase that means when I become rich, I will do such and such. But using this example of Lotto, we can also see, we can also go a little bit further and see what the joys of cyclic existence actually lead to. So we could say that winning Lotto is, although Lotto and all the prizes from Lotto are not cyclic existence in themselves, the desire for these things and the great happiness we get from getting these things is part of cyclic existence. Our anticipation and our desire for these things is part of cyclic existence. So when we get them, we think we'll be very happy. We think this is amazing. Now all my problems and difficulties will be solved, and nothing can harm me anymore. But actually, as have been found by many people who've won lotto, that's not actually the case. It's relevant that the lotto board has set up a counseling service for those who have won lotto, because so many times winning something like lotto, getting great good fortune, great wealth, something that is regarded as very beneficial in a samsaric sense, has led to unhappiness and misfortune for the people that won it, and for the people that associate with them. There are two examples. The Daily Beast, which is a magazine type website, kind of website that looks at the news of the day and has commentary and so on, articles on the latest news of the day. Once, right, the year before last, wrote an article on the effects of winning great amounts of money, and quoted a person by the name of Jeffrey Dampier, who won $20 million, and also quoted another person who won $135 million, a man by the name of Jack Whittaker, and the effects that it had on them. Jeffrey Dampier was generous to everybody, to his family and so on. But that didn't help him when his sister-in-law and her boyfriend kidnapped him and tortured him and robbed him of his money. And they did that because, of course, they thought he was rich. He'd become rich, and they wanted what he had. So although he won big and was generous with what he had, it didn't actually help him in the end. The man by the name of Jack Whittaker is even a more lurid example. He won 135 million, and he also was very generous. He immediately gave away 50 million to charity and so on. I wanted to build churches, he said. I wanted to get people food that didn't have food. I wanted to provide clothing for children that needed clothing, and so on. And so he provided all these things. But unfortunately, he also made his good fortune well known. He was interviewed on a number of TV stations and so on. And so people came to know that he had all this money. And he found that it was a complete curse. Wherever he went, even to watch a baseball game, people would come up to him and they would congratulate him, and then they would ask for money. He was constantly being asked for money. And before he'd won the money, he had a construction business which was going very well. He had a number of clients, and he had no problems. Nobody had any problems with his work. But after he won the money, he was saddled with 400 lawsuits of people who were trying to get a lot of money out of him. As soon as people knew that he had money, they used that knowledge and their relationship with him, their business relationship with him, and he found himself defending 400 lawsuits. Not only that, he had a favorite niece, or granddaughter, sorry, and he shared his wealth with her and gave her $2,000 a week and bought what she wanted. And although he thought that it would set her up for life and bring her happiness for life, actually it just led her to getting into the drug culture and eventually dying through drugs. So his final comment in the article on the Daily Beast, he said, my wife had said she wished she had torn the Powerball ticket up. Well, I wish that I'd torn the ticket up too. It brought him so much unhappiness. So this is like samsaric happiness. That when we get something in samsara, when we have a samsaric happiness, like winning lotto, it comes with a big sting in its tail. And if we're not careful, it can take us over and can cause us a lot more grief, lead to a lot more grief than if we'd not had that good fortune in the first place. It's a good teaching on samsaric happiness that we're trying to escape through the three principles of the path. And thinking of things like this, when our mind becomes attached to samsaric pleasures, thinking in this way helps us to develop renunciation, to think, well, yes, it would be nice to have so much money, but it also it has the very great potential to lead me into a difficult situation, a sort of situation that I would much rather not be in. Of course, I'm not saying that people who have won lotto and have a good fortune have not been able to use their good fortune for benefit and have been careful about what they've done with that good fortune. If we approach it in the right way, if we have a renounced mind, a mind of renunciation, and not a mind of samsara grasping and craving, then we can use a lotto win or any such good fortune and stay immune to the effects of the samsaric effects, which just lead to suffering and unhappiness. I think of people who've won lotto but have not given up their job and have just continued in their way, in their life, just normally, just not spent up big, or maybe helped a few people, helped their relatives and helped other people, but not spent up big or not made a big fuss of their win, and have kept their life going more or less the way that it was going before. And these people have a much greater chance of using their good fortune in a more enlightened way, we can say. So we can enjoy, as Geshe Sonam Rinchen says, we can enjoy the pleasures of cyclic existence. It's not that we need to give up the pleasures of cyclic existence, but we have to give up our craving, our addiction, our grasping at them as if they have some real value to bring us happiness. This is what Geshe Sonam Rinchen says. Recognizing the rarity and value of human life, in which the truly fortunate enjoy many freedoms and riches, they are as single-minded about attaining liberation as someone whose hair has caught fire would be about extinguishing it. They feel a strong conviction regarding the path to enlightenment, the path which the victorious ones delight to see us follow. Do we meet these criteria? What does indifference to the delights of cyclic existence mean? We need neither destroy our pleasure in them nor ignore them, but overcome our addictive craving for them. So that is the most important point. It's not the pleasures of cyclic existence. It's not winning lotto. It's not having the flash cars and so on. That is the problem. It is what we do with them and our craving for them, our grasping as if they had some inherent value and pleasure in themselves that we can extract from them, and our craving for them. This is what causes samsara. This is what perpetuates and causes all our samsaric problems and difficulties. And it's not only money, and resources that the mind can be addicted to. It can be addicted to all sorts of things. It can be addicted to our ideas, our culture, anything. Sorry about the light. So there's a story of a Buddhist monk that was addicted to his bowl. He had attached to his wooden bowl, and that when he died, he was born as a worm in the bowl, because of his great attachment for the bowl. So it's not, anything can stir up our craving and attachment and grasping at samsara, and that creates samsara. That craving and grasping creates samsara. So it's not like all the money that you can get from lotto is the problem. That's not the problem. It's our craving and our grasping at it as if it is something that is real happiness, that has on it from its own side some kind of real happiness, and that we crave because we think it will solve all our problems. That kind of mind, that is the samsaric mind. That renunciation, counteracts. There's a story which I've told many times, about a beggar who found a diamond in a trash heap. So maybe he was looking there and he found this diamond ring or something very valuable, a diamond, and he wondered who he could give it to. And eventually he took it to the king of that country, and he gave it to the king and he said, "Here, this is for you." And the king looked at him, this beggar standing in front of him, giving him a diamond. And the king said to him, "Why are you giving me this? You're a beggar. Why don't you use it for yourself?" And the beggar said to him, "I am actually very content with what I am and what I've got. I don't need anything else. I'm happy to beg for my food, and I'm happy where I stay. My mind is completely contented. But you are always looking for more wealth. Your mind never stops looking for wealth. You've got a great deal of wealth, but you're always craving for more. And so that's why I'm giving this to you, because this is more satisfactory to your mind than it is to my mind." So there we can see an attitude of renunciation. The attitude of renunciation in contrast to the attitude of lack. And in this case, it was the beggar that was the rich man, and it was the king that was the poor man, because what makes you rich or poor is not the amount of wealth that you have. It's your mind. It's what's going on in your mind. And if you're contented with very little, you can be very rich in your life. But even if you're very, very wealthy and you have $315 million, but your mind's still craving more, in fact, you are the beggar. You are still the one that's out there with his hand out, looking for more, wanting others to give you more and more wealth. So we need to bear this in mind, that it's not what's out in our environment that is cause of the problems. It is our lack of renunciation, our lack of being contented with what we have, and not craving, and what makes us suffer and have problems is our craving for things to be different, our craving for things to have more, our mind of lack, that there's something missing, there's something I need more, something is not right, I need to change it. That kind of mind, that is a samsaric mind. And that is the mind that renunciation addresses. The what we call in this text, what is called the essence of the Buddha's teaching, is this mind that is not interested in attaining all the wealth and the pleasures of cyclic existence, not craving and desiring them, not attached to them, but putting them aside. Not whether you've got lots of wealth or whether you've only got a very little wealth, doesn't make any matter to your mind. You are contented with wherever you go. Just like the Buddha, he could go to a rich man's house and eat very delicious food, very beautiful, well cooked, well presented food, or he could go to a beggar man's house, a very poor man's house, and just eat rice. And for him, it was the same. It was the same. Because his mind did not crave one or the other. And he was more concerned with bringing benefit to the wealthy man and the poor man than he was with anything, with a mind that criticized the food or felt some kind of lack. And he, in his own mind, completely contented, completely happy, whatever he was presented with. And that is the type of mind that we need to develop to enter the Buddhist path. And now we've come to the end of our time together. I'd like to thank you again for being here. And I hope the teachings have brought you some benefit, give you something to think about anyway. And I'm sorry about the quality, but the connection we have here is quite poor. And there's nothing, unless I go to another location, there's not much I can do to improve the quality of the live stream. So I apologize for that. Before we go, let's just dedicate, think about why, dedicate whatever positive potential that we have developed today, and thinking again why we came to the teachings, and dedicating this positive potential to our purpose, so that seals the whole deal, and this positive potential cannot be destroyed by anger or wrong views or other things that destroy our positive potential in a normal course of events. So let's just take a moment to dedicate, and if you can dedicate to attaining enlightenment for the benefit of all beings, please make that kind of dedication, because it's the most powerful type of dedication. So thank you very much. May your week go very well. Please be careful. Stay careful in this coronavirus environment. Please take care and don't put yourself or others in any kind of danger. And I hope that everything goes well for you. And I look forward to meeting up again next Tuesday, if I'm still alive. Thanks and goodbye.